Okay, wow, this is a big classroom. How many people here are teachers? I'm just curious, put your hands up. Okay. How many here are parents that coach? Okay. And how many are just finished playing basketball and you're starting to coach? Okay, so we've got the spectrum, right? And I can remember, being at that spectrum and beginning and starting coaching and realizing when I first started coaching, I knew everything because I'd finished playing and I knew everything and I knew exactly what to do. And then I started coaching for real, and then I had this moment where my heart just sunk and it went, oh boy, I don't know anything. And I think some of us have probably felt that too, and this is why we're here, right? We come to these clinics because we want to get new ideas, okay? Have you ever heard of TED Talks? Does anybody have heard of TED Talks, TED.org? No? Should check out the site. It's an amazing site because what it does is it has speakers that talk about everything, ranging from science, arts, everything, leadership, etc. And it's a wonderful site. And their mantra is ideas worth spreading. And I like that because I think that this is what I'm trying to do here is utilize something that is worth spreading. But this is going to be kind of interactive as we do this, okay? So I know that a lot of you, do you all have your coach's bags here? Most of us, we have it here? Okay, so we're going to do something right now. Okay, I need you guys here. Please take out your handbook. I'd like you guys to have that in your hand as we're doing this. See, I miss teaching. I'm not in the classroom anymore. I'm an administrator now, so I don't get to teach often. So I've got a captive audience, so I'm going to try to teach a bit. Right, Colby, Connor, you guys know that. All right. I know that yesterday, Coach Triano, he talked about the fact that, basketball knowledge and coaching ability, it's everywhere now. We have access to so much information. You can get championship productions. You can go to YouTube and find out information. And it's really, really wonderful, the amount of access we have. We've come here to see Steve Brown, Tanya McKay, Chris McDowell, Kirby Shep, Cam Moskal, Jay himself, and soon Gil Chung and Mike Rainbow and Pam Danis will be here as well to present because we want to see some ideas and see some things that we can do. Now, the things that we're looking at strategies and skills, etc. What I'm talking about is culture. And we're talking about culture of a team and a program and some of the things that you can do to help develop a positive culture. And there's some tools we're going to look at. When I began looking at PCA, it was actually interesting. It actually started when I was a parent and I went to WNBA games for one of my daughters. And I remember when they were 5 to 8 years old, WNBA games were unreal. You'd go there, everybody's happy, they're cheering, kids score a basket, both sides are cheering, everybody's happy, grandpa's there, everybody's smiling. When we're done, everybody's got a little, pep in their walk, it doesn't matter, And then all of a sudden, the next year, they turned 9. And then guess what happened? They put up the score clock. And then everybody lost their minds. And it was shocking to me because I was like, wow, these are the same people I saw last year. And all of a sudden, the mentality has totally changed when we had this scoreboard put on. And it was absolutely, it kind of hit me in here, and I was just like, wow, this doesn't feel good. And there's something we've got to do about this. So I started searching and looking. So I went and I was researching online, and I talked to a friend of mine in San Jose who kind of led me towards this. A fellow by the name of Jim Thompson started this. Now, the reason he started this was there was an alarming statistic, okay? And this was the statistic that they talk about, the PCA. Okay, 70% of kids drop out of organized youth sports by the age of 13. Okay, and oftentimes what happens is there's this funneling that takes place because the experience isn't good. We've read in the news, we've heard about, parents fighting at games, kids playing overly aggressive. I know Cam Moskal talked about that yesterday. And so we see these things that are happening that are causing funneling to take place of these athletes out of the sport, and way too soon. I want to talk about a word, and I know someone sitting up here will know this word when I show it. Nostemia. Anybody ever heard that word before? No? Okay. Have you heard it? It's a combination of nostalgia and amnesia. Okay? And what happens is when we look back at our times when we played, we have this kind of nostalgic feel, and oh, it was so good. We had great times. And every time you get together with friends, you seldom talk about the plays you ran. You talk about all the good times you had, right? And oftentimes, if you're lucky enough to have a really good experience in terms of the coaching that you received, good for you. And oftentimes, though, kids don't necessarily receive that. And some of us in here, we may have had really negative experiences when we were coached. Okay? And so what happens sometimes is when we begin to coach, we kind of develop this. Because we forget that, you know what? It was pretty good. There's probably some things that could have been much better. Like I didn't need to be, ridiculed or criticized every 5 seconds. Right? And maybe there was a better way to bring something out of me. And it's funny because we start realizing it as we develop as coaches is that there's better ways of motivating people and better ways of finding and drawing it out of them, rather than being critical and just, not positive. So this is nostemia. Now, so the technical committee here at Basketball Manitoba asked me, to come and sit on the technical committee and look at this model. Now you can see, oops, too fast. Come on, get back. Oh, be nice. Okay, there we go. Okay, so they had asked me to talk about it, and we sat down and we looked at it. And the reason we thought that it would be beneficial is for that exact reason, that we have so many coaches here that are involved with kids at the grassroots level, and that's kind of the key area of where we need some help and support in terms of ensuring that the experience is good for kids. Now, sitting on this, the advisory for this, of course, you see Phil Jackson, Doc Rivers is on this as well, Shane Battier, you saw his picture as well. So those are basketball people that are very involved in this movement. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at some of the free tools that actually come with this this model, and it's a thing of changing our way of thinking. So what I'd like you to do right now is the research summary. If you turn to page 145, I want you to take about a minute or so, and I just want you to read it. Okay? They turned off the lights at him. Just flash your hand up when you're done reading so I get an idea. Okay, so as you can see, it's not about, this isn't just about being positive. You still want to win, okay? Because, we play sports because we do enjoy the competition, and winning is part of it, and being involved in that is one of the rewards. But we want to make sure that we're looking at the double goal, which is, teaching kids lessons in terms of building character. The three things that they state here, redefining winner, filling the emotional tank, and honoring the game, is what we're going to look at. Now, this is only the first page of the summary. It's actually 13 pages, and if you go to the Basketball Manitoba website or positivecoach.org, it has the whole summary. And I'll show you guys where the link, etc., at the end of this. But what's really good about the summary is it's exactly what it's mentioned here. It's based on research, and it's based on educational research and child psychology, and it's very, very well, research-based, and so there is a lot of time that's gone in to look at this model and looking at different ways of thinking. Now, what I'd like to look at next is redefining winner. So it talks about redefining winner. So what I'd like you to do right now is look at page 146. Now there's three numbers there, 1, 2, and 3. And what I'd like you to do is just read those briefly, those three items. So those three items, when you look at it, we're talking about effort, learning, and bouncing back from mistakes. And I know that some of us are going, well, that's what I do, right? But again, from the show of hands, we had people at different stages of their coaching development. So this could be an aha for some people in terms of what their focus is. So this is actually a script that could be utilized, and it's just an idea. It's just, you can make it your own in terms of your discussion with your players. So looking at the Elm Tree of Learning is what they call it. So it's effort, learning, and bouncing back from mistakes is what the model professes here. Now, the next thing is filling the emotional tank. If you flip to the next page, 147. Now there's another script here. And this script talks about filling the emotional tank. Now, we all know that a vehicle with very little gas isn't going to get very far. So the reality is the words that we use and the things that we say to kids are critical and important in terms of being able to bring the best out of them. And oftentimes, for every one negative thing you said, and it's funny how kids hold on to it, and you've probably heard this, when a kid said, well, you said I couldn't do this. And you probably said it in passing. You didn't really, mean to emphasize it, but they really, really took it to heart. And those comments, sometimes we don't realize we're doing it, but that one comment can really, really affect the kid's perception of themselves and their ability to be able to do things. And it's funny because, I remember when I first started coaching, I was like that, and I was like, you know what? When I started looking at this stuff and then also changing the way of thinking as I was progressing to here, lots of coaches talked about that ratio between praise and criticism, and that being crucial. So for every one negative thing you say, they suggest a rate of 5 positive things, or five, if you see the correction take place, that you want to make sure that you point it out. And I've been very overt in practice to do that because I know that kids, they only sometimes hear the negative. Right, guys? Sometimes we only hear the negative. Is that right? And it's hard sometimes to filter and hear the positive, because what happens is sometimes we don't hear it all the time. And sometimes we may be motivated by negativity, which isn't always a good thing. But we want to be able to have, good interactions with our players. Are you guys going to be coaches someday? You need to pay attention then, right? Okay? All right. So what we're looking at next here, the emotional tank, as I mentioned, 5-to-1 ratio. You want to look at that when you're dealing and coaching kids. Now the next one here, this actually ties in nicely. Okay, this actually ties in very nicely with what Cam Moskal said yesterday. He was talking about some points of emphasis. How many people are here for that? The points of emphasis? Okay, I'll talk about that again in a moment. Now, we're going to look over on page 148. I'd like you to look at the highlighted items there. There's an acronym that they're using, it's called ROOTS. And the roots are R is for rules, O is for opponents, O is for officials, and T is for teammates, and S is for self. Just take a moment and read those paragraphs. Flash your hand up so I can, thank you. So, and I think that sometimes that we kind of, because sport is so emotional, and oftentimes because we get so caught up in it, we forget these things. And, you know, when it comes to officials, sometimes we lose our cool. And I know that there was a point of emphasis that Cam talked about was the fact that, you know, we're going to work at the dialogue between coaches. We're looking at, you know, cleaning up, you know, the aggressive, illegal contact, et cetera, that makes it very limiting for kids to be able to demonstrate skill. Do you guys remember what happened in hockey? I guess it was about 7, 8 years ago when all the clutching and grabbing and hooking and people they stopped going to watch because the skill was being taken out of the sport. And so I guess these points of emphasis is to kind of put that back in place. Now what I'd like you to do is turn to page 149. And we're going to look at these tools. Now these are in this book, and I've utilized these. I've utilized this at an elementary school that I worked at. I utilized it with my club program. And what we have here are some things that you can utilize to help build your culture. Because oftentimes, if we're not clear with parents in terms of our expectations or what our philosophy is, it's difficult for them to have a good idea of what you're going to be about. So just have a quick look here. This is the Parental Pledge. Just take a quick look at those, read through those 8 items. Okay. Okay, so again, this is reinforcing the things that we talked about prior in terms of this model and having the parents look at it. And I've also done this as well, as I printed out the summary and I've given it to the parents and I've given it to the players. Because as I mentioned, players are going to become coaches and there's parents here that have become coaches because your kids are playing. And so sharing that information and outlining your expectations in terms of how things are going to operate, in terms of how you'll coach, is really, really beneficial. On page 150, what's really interesting on the right-hand column, 1, 2, and 3, it's actually, this is for the parents to kind of read and look at, and it also gives some ideas for them in terms of how they can help to support when you're looking at something like Redefining Winner. Just read those 4 items on the right-hand column. Those 4 little conversation pieces, and I'm sure we've all had this, I've had this experience, you know, and I'll be honest, the uncomfortable drive home, you know, after a game, and you're like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? You should have been here. You should have done that. Anybody have that conversation? Be honest. Okay. All right. Oh, boy. There's a lot. Okay. All right. There's a lot. exemplary parents up there. Good. So what was interesting, though, is that when I looked at that, I was like, wow, it does make sense, because that conversation that you have on the drive home, can be beneficial, but you kind of, especially, after a loss, they don't want to talk about it. They know they lost. We don't need to, tell them why they lost. I mean, they understand, but now it's just about building a desire to want to work on the skills and improving and mastering those things. And this is the primary focus of this, is that you want to be able to work on mastery of the skill, mastery of being a team player, those kind of things. The winning, if it happens, is great. If it doesn't, then you got to look at what you need to work at. So it's the mastery focus. So this 150, you can actually, that's only the first portion of it. On the website, it has the other aspects of the PCA, and it gives suggestions on those conversations for the parents when they're discussing with their kids related to roots, etc., and filling the emotional tank. The last, if you turn to page 151, this may be something that you want to hand out as well, because again, it outlines to the parents, again, the things that they can do to help the experience be positive and beneficial for their kids. I'll let you read it on your own. Now, here's a scary one, page 152. Look at the top of that. That looks scary, doesn't it? Oh, I should keep moving, shouldn't I? I keep talking, but I'm not flipping. There we are, 152. Coach evaluation questionnaire for parents. So, the model talks about those three important things. Now, having an evaluation by your parents to say whether or not you uphold these things, it's kind of scary, but I think that it is a beneficial thing, because it's that whole circular feedback, right? So, the way that things are seen, or you perceive it may not be the same. But again, for accountability, if you were to have parents kind of evaluate how you did it, the job, and coached and interacted with their kids, it may be different in terms of the interactions. But I know we have lots of positive people here. Okay? So, now the last page, 153, is the last thing I want to look at, which is the role of culture keeper. And I've assigned parents to do this, where they've walked in, and they've sat with the group of other parents, and they were identified, and they would work with other parents if they were having issues, and talk with them, and suggest, in terms of keeping things PCA as best as possible. And I know that's a tough thing to ask, but I think that if you have a parent meeting where you talk about all this and you're quite overt about it, about your expectations of parental behaviors, that they will buy in. And if they're not being accountable to the parental pledge or the letter, etc., that's a great conversation piece. Because you can sit down and talk about those things and say, well, this is what we've identified as important. We need to maybe work on this. So I talked about the points of emphasis again. I believe that this model, if we can work at incorporating and doing these kind of things with our groups and work on the culture, that it would really, really help, because I know that we're losing a lot of young officials. We're losing a lot of young officials because of the dialogue. And I know I'm guilty of it when I was younger, and I was, exuberant and negative. But I've really worked at that in terms of improving my dialogue and interactions with officials, because I think it's important that their job is to teach the rules and guidelines of the games. My job is to coach the kids and help them master skill. And we're actually working together. We're not working against each other. But sometimes we let the emotions get the better of us, and we kind of look at it in that method. So, again, this is identifying culture and improving culture. Just give me a moment. And again, as I had mentioned before, the primary goal of the PCA is the fact that we have 70%. This is an American statistic, but I don't think it's too far off in terms of what we see here. And so the alarming thing for me is that, and I had this conversation actually at Nike camp with a coach, and I had talked, we had talked about grassroots basketball and what the key was. And we talked about the fact that because we have a small quantity of kids playing, the quality of our coaching has to be that much better. Because that's kind of the critical thing, and we have to keep kids playing as long as they can so that they can develop. and have a good experience. So, in summation, that's basically what I wanted to present today. They're just ideas, they're concepts. Again, like I said, TED Talks, ideas worth spreading. I think this idea is worth spreading. And we as a basketball community, Basketball Manitoba, have spent time putting this up on our website. And right here we have all the information that that's summarized in the book is actually located under About, and you can get access to it. And there's a wonderful little video that has Steve Young, former football player. He's talking. He's a spokesperson for them as well too. So I'd really encourage you to go have a look at the website, take a look at the information, and if you would like to incorporate it into your club, I'd really suggest that you do. And I think it's a great way to kind of help build and improve the culture overall. So thank you for your time. And this is the website as well, positivecoach.org. You can go visit there, and there's lots of free tips and tools and things related to it. So thank you. Have a good afternoon.